Hi, this is James Headley, and welcome back to the Living in Naples channel. I'm so appreciative of the former clients who continue to be repeat clients, those who refer me to others, and also just the second and third level connections that I've been able to make based upon the interactions with folks in the Southwest Florida area. Along with the many of you who have reached out after watching one or more of the videos here on the channel, you're the inspiration for these regular postings, and you're the reason that I take some comfort in the inherently uncomfortable tasks of putting myself out there on these videos for all to see, and also being completely honest and transparent, even if it runs counter to some of my own self-interests. Today's update is a good example of that, as I'm going to share some thoughts on when it might be better for someone to rent versus working with me to buy a home in the Naples area. To be clear, if you saw the title of this video and you're tuning in for one of those analyses of the direct costs of renting versus buying, or some hackneyed cliches like who cares about interest rates? If you're renting, you're paying 100% interest rate since you aren't building any equity. This isn't the video for you. Before diving in on what this episode is about, let me just take a second to thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing, and urge you to continue doing so. I really appreciate it. And with that said, let's look at 4 key questions that I think could be useful to you in framing the decision if you are weighing the prospect of buying a home in the Naples area and or renting there instead. First question is, what's your residency timeline look like? By this, I mean, are you going to be living in the area full-time or nearly full-time? Or are you planning to spend 2 to 3 months there per year? The more days and months you expect to spend in the paradise that is Naples and Marco Island, the likelier it is that buying is going to be right for you. Build that equity up, avoid being subject to the changing nature of the marketplace, the whims of landlords' rent increases, etc. So that definitely a good starting point for this decision that you're going to be making. Number 2, what's your outlook on the housing market and perhaps the broader economy in general? If you've tuned into other videos on the channel, you've heard me say a number of times that I don't have a crystal ball, but that my bet is on a continuing normalization of the real estate market in the area for the foreseeable future. By this, I mean that we shouldn't expect to see hockey stick price increases like we saw for the better part of the last 2 years, prior to the last 6 months of normalization. But I also don't anticipate a return to the bust years of the late 2000s, the 2008 and beyond period. That's just me, though. If you think we are in for a macro downturn, that also has micro effects like the slowing of migration to Florida from other states, renting may be good for you as you wait for the resulting anticipated decline in home prices that would stem from that. I just would urge you to be cautious and honest with yourself as you make this assessment. Basically, do you really believe that that's what's going to happen, or that there's greater likelihood of that happening? Or is it just wishful thinking, perhaps stemming from looking at where prices were prior to 2020, late 2020, or even going back to the early 2010s and teens? That could cost you a lot in the short and long term if ultimately you do decide to purchase. Brings us to question number 3, and that's, what's your risk tolerance? Beyond the risks of the future direction of the housing market that are inherent in the last question, I also think you should consider how you feel about specific and general risk considerations. For example, how would you deal with another hurricane like Ian or Irma coming to the area? If you're thinking about renting out your home for some time period when you're not using it, if you were to purchase, what if it doesn't rent for a month or 2, 1 year? In other words, is it worth it for you to perhaps come out worse financially in the long run in exchange for not bearing the psychic and emotional strains of taking on ownership risk? And finally, that brings us to number 4. What's your intended lifestyle in Southwest Florida? Are you looking to spend time in the Naples area in order to enjoy the great weather in the winter, the beaches, parks, shopping and dining, and the like? Or are specific amenities like a boat dock or a specific golf course a big part of your plans? If you fall more in that former category, renting may be just fine, depending upon how you answered the previous questions. However, if you're looking to enjoy more specific and more place-bound amenities, such as boating or golfing, I would argue that you may want to lean more toward buying now than putting it off by renting. Just look at the wait list for marinas, for most private golf memberships, and even many community lifestyle centers and clubs, like the Players Club and Spa at Lely Resort, for example. And it's easy to see that if you don't jump at attractive opportunities to lock those in by buying, they may not present themselves when you are ready to do so or when you want them to be there. Related to this, maybe you've had the good fortune in the past of renting somewhere where the amenities that you desire come as part of that rental agreement. That may sound like the best of both worlds for many of you, and I understand that, absolutely. But just ask yourself, where would you be if the owner decided to sell to someone who planned to use the residence full time in the future? Or if the rent was doubled between this season and next, for example? Clearly there are some considerable risks to consider on the continue to rent side of the equation. Again, I hope these questions help you to frame this very important decision that you may be considering making. As always, it'd be my pleasure and the highest honor to discuss your particular context anytime and help you to work through some of these considerations and others. Please do reach out at your convenience or pass along my information to folks that you think might benefit from that kind of conversation. And in the meantime, thanks again for tuning in, liking, subscribing, and sharing, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care.